Today we're here to speak to the recently released annual crime statistics from Statistics Canada, and I'm happy to announce that Edmonton has experienced some positive trends that we'll be highlighting today as we go forward. And this is a result in large part thanks to the various targeted initiatives, the various partnerships that EPS have, and partly as well for the ability to do longer term planning with the stable funding formula that's now in place. Most significantly, Edmonton's total crime rate is down 11% from 2022, while nationally, the overall police reported crime rate in Canada went up 3%. So we have a marked difference between Edmonton and the rest of Canada. This marks one of the largest decreased crime rates among Canadian metropolitan cities in 2023. Having said that, we still have much work to do in the areas of ongoing violent crime, which remains a challenge for the service that we've spoken to many times over the last year. Edmonton's violent crime rate increased 2% from 2022 to 2023. Assault level 1 incidents increased by 8.8%, and assault level 2 incidents involving weapon or bodily harm increased by 6.2% in our city in 2023. EPS will continue to address violent crimes through meaningful initiatives such as the Safer Public Spaces and targeted police and partnership deployments, while making adjustments as the data and evidence tell us to. In large part, those increases are related to repeat violent offenders that we work with our partners in corrections and probations in order to monitor. Edmonton's property crime rate in our city dropped by 15% from 2022 to 2023. One of the primary drivers of this 15% decrease was a significant drop of 25.7% in theft under $5,000 from a motor vehicle. Specifically, that would be catalytic converter thefts decreased across our city in part due to the increased focus by targeted initiatives, as well as things like the Community Solutions Accelerator Challenge, which looked for solutions for catalytic converters specifically. Edmonton's overall crime severity index in the city, which measures the volume and severity of crime, remained relatively stable at 0.6% increase in Edmonton between 22 and 23. To be clear, this isn't a 1 or 2 year anomaly. Over the last 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, the crime severity index decreased at 13% overall. Our policing and strategic partnerships model is paying dividends for the city of Edmonton and the citizens. Edmonton's violent crime severity increased by 4%, however, between 2022 and 2023. This is primarily driven in the increase in firearms and weapons that we have spoken to numerous times over the past year, and we continue to have targeted initiatives to address. Our non-violent crime severity experienced a decrease of 1%. Key drivers in this decrease were a 12.4% drop in shoplifting, as well as an 11.6% drop in break-and-enters. Overall, EPS investigators were busy with more fraud-related crimes in 2023, which increased by 7.7% over 2022. EPS is not alone in this statistic. Across Canada, and particularly since the pandemic, we've seen frauds and online frauds increase dramatically, and we need to be focused on both education as well as persistence on targeting individuals perpetrating these events. In that vein, the Community Solutions Accelerator, the Edmonton Police Service, and the Alberta Securities Commission are issuing a challenge soon with regards to plans on how we can help address this issue. Extortion was also trending higher last year at 24.8%, some of which was a result of the recent Gaslight project, which we just had a media event on last week. Assault level 1 and assault level 2s continue to be a concern for us. Overall, if we look at the top 10 incidents that we had, we did achieve significant decreases in the 10 most frequent items that we have, with some notable exceptions which we've highlighted. To close out 2023, I want to give you an idea of where we are at with regards to 2024 thus far. We are pleased to announce that these are preliminary numbers. However, thus far, we are seeing continued decrease of 14% from 2023 to 2024 in the first 6 months. And there's also been a 2% decrease in violent criminal-related incidents in the citywide over the same period of time. So make no mistake, these are very positive results, and they are driven largely by the proactive measures that our officers are taking and by the partnerships that we have established with community members, the public, as well as our elected officials. Both EPS and its valued partners must continue to walk in this direction while remaining flexible so that we can address crime as it changes. So we will now accept any questions, both myself and Tim. So please, we're ready to go.
Adam Zagarelli, City News. Just looking at the top 10 violations for Edmonton Municipal, you got fraud, assault level 1 and assault level 2. Do you want to just talk about assault level 1 and 2, what those are,
Yep.
are what involved?
So assault level 1 is basically any assault that does not involve a weapon. So it's a general assault. Assault level 2 is when you're getting into the weapons. So that's where you'd have knives perhaps or other weapons involved.
And looking at the numbers, obviously we see general crime is coming down, violent crime is going up. But if you look at the numbers pre-pandemic, they were quite high compared to what they are now. Yep. Do you think the pandemic had a bit to play with those numbers coming down, or is this strictly initiatives?
So I think during the pandemic, as you mentioned, the numbers did come down nationally. So every major municipality had decreases for obvious reasons during the pandemic. If you look back at the 2022 numbers and the 2023 numbers, we've been able to buck the trend that other municipalities have not thus far. So if you look at the last 2 years for major municipal centers, they've rebounded back up to where they were prior to pandemic, plus some. We've been able to hold the line essentially after a small bump last year, where we're at today. So we're quite pleased with where we've been.
Lauren Boothby, Edmonton Journal. Can you give some examples of the programs you said that the police has done that you think has reduced the crime?
Yeah, so a number of them. I mean, if we look at the catalytic converter thefts, we certainly had focused programs on the catalytic converters as well as engaging the public to be more preventative in that space. We have our PAC teams, we have our high-risk encampment teams that are also focused on the disorder in downtown in particular. We also have our partnerships with Alert for various other organized gang type activities which are related to things like the catalytic converter thefts and the movement of those products across Western Canada. Drugs as well would be in that category. And I think in this year thus far, since late 2023 into 2024, certainly we've been much more proactive in the safer public spaces realm where the officers are being proactive about engaging the community more and addressing the open air drug use as we see.
I can't find the local stats, but nationally hate crimes are up. Can you talk about what the situation is in Edmonton, what groups are being targeted the most, and what you know that's driving that?
So I can give you some idea of that. I'm not the expert in the hate crimes area. Our hate crimes numbers are relatively unchanged from last year. They ebb and flow with what happens both in Canada and the world. Certainly with the Palestinian-Israel situation, there's been a number of events that have taken place in Edmonton as well as nationally. There's other items that do come across throughout that. We've been relatively stable. Those are items that are very impactful to the community. They are somewhat of a lesser occurrence than most of the other ones. And generally speaking, hate crime is labeled because it's a motivator for the particular event, like an assault or something else that takes place. So there is a threshold that has to be met to be categorized as a hate crime. That's why the numbers aren't quite as high as you may think they may be, but they're there and they're very concerning and we have focus on them.
Another one nationally, do you know what's happening locally? More cases of child pornography.
Yeah, so there's a couple of, the StatsCan report actually speaks to that quite well. The National Center has been established and has encouraged a lot of historical reporting, as well as some of the tools that police use are detecting more online child pornography, and those all get added to those statistics. So it's a combination of historical reports coming in, as well as new detection pieces. Generally, those are online-based detection items that are coming in the door nationally. That's not unique to Edmonton. Calgary has the same issue as was highlighted in the report.
And so does Edmonton have specific tools that you use for that? What do you use?
Yes, so there are specific tools. We don't divulge what those tools are for obvious reasons, and primarily that comes through Alert. They're the provincial body that does a lot of that work and then works with the municipalities when there's a detection that takes place.
Just comparing the numbers to other places in Canada, where does Edmonton line up? Is it the same where violent crime is up in other cities as well, where general crime is down? Can you just talk about how this relates to other cities, probably just the major cities, I guess? Yeah,
so if you're looking at the major centers where you're, let's say, approaching that 500,000 and up range, the violence is up generally across all cities. Ours is a smaller increase than many of them. We certainly have a markedly different result in regards to property crime than most of the other major centers. Calgary also has some decreases in that space. So Alberta seems to be a bit of an anomaly. Other provinces and major centers are seeing those increases as they continued out of the pandemic last year and on to this year. We've been able to buck that trend. I believe it's through the strategies that we have both in Edmonton and Calgary and some of the provincial strategies that are underway.
You mentioned Lauren Boothby, Edmonton Journal. You mentioned that the stable funding you mentioned stable funding from the city. Since the police funding formula came into place, what has Edmonton Police done in terms of, like, have you actually hired like a certain number more people? Have you changed programming or anything? How does that increase in funding change the outcome? How do you know that those are linked?
Yeah, so a couple items. When we have a stable funding formula, whether that's the city or provincial grant programs that go on multiple years, it allows us to plan both staffing and deployment model over a longer period of time. So case in point, if we look at the TRACS initiative, for example, funding came in for that. We were able to up our recruiting this year to fill those spaces, and then we can roll out. Same thing, if we know what our funding will be next year and the year after, we can plan our recruiting and training, because there's a lag between the time somebody receives funding to when we hire to when we train to they hit the street. If we know that years in advance, then we can both plan where they're going to be, what they're going to be trained and rolled out into, and we can plan overall our crime management model for the entire city.
Adam Ziccarelli with City News again. Looking at those numbers, do we have an age range? Like, over the last couple of months, we've been talking about youth being involved in some of these events. Do we have an age range of out of those numbers, how many of them are under the age of 18 or around the age of 18, and how many of them are significantly older?
Yeah, I don't have that with me. I can tell you, statistically speaking, going back for decades, it's the 18 to 24-year-old that do the majority of criminal activity, and then it decreases with age as you go, and it's also lower in the youth side as well. So there's kind of this peak that comes at that, and then it ages out. That's been very well-known criminal theory for a long time in Canada.
Are we seeing more people at younger ages involved in these crimes?
I'd have to go back and do some further analysis for you to give you a very clear answer on that. I think what we're not seeing, at least anecdotally, a large spike in youth-related crime, if that's what you're asking.
You said shoplifting is down. How did you get those numbers? Is that from calls coming in?
Yes, those would be incidents that are reported to the police where an investigative file is created. So criminal incident is a call that results in an investigation attached to it.
So does that, I don't know if you know this, or is that just down because some retailers are just not calling it in and they have their own security? Like, is there any correlation between the two? Because some call and it's, depending on the board,
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at any reporting of call type, and if you look at something like StatsCan's victim survey, there is always a percentage of unreported crimes there. So if we look at sexual assaults, statistically only 38% of those get reported, right? So it's true in any crime category. We can only address and speak to the ones that get reported to us. So is that reduction entirely from proactive efforts? Probably not. Is there some reporting practices in there? Absolutely, there could be that as well. So we can't report on what we don't get, so we do encourage everybody to report to us, because if there's a shoplifting in one place, they're probably doing it in another, and if we can stop one, we can stop 5.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Ariel Fournier, CBC. I was wondering about the online frauds increase that you mentioned.
I'll
Can we
throw that
hear
over to
about?
Inspector Horn. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can we hear about what kind of online frauds? Because you mentioned there was a large increase.
Good morning. Frauds are up nationwide, and a lot of it comes down to online frauds, whether it's through romance scams, different ways that they're attacking a vulnerable community who is not prepared for this. So the biggest thing that we urge with this is education around the methods that the fraudsters will use to try to impact our community. We know that it causes millions of dollars of loss every year, and it impacts almost everyone in our community that we're aware of. So why is this up? I think that the tools, the technology that's being used is profound, and we're trying to be responsive to that and to learn and to grow as well, and to collaborate with partners in the tech industry to get ahead of this, but also by way of getting ahead of it in terms of communication. I think that's the biggest factor will be educational initiatives that we continue to promote in the community.
So what are the primary kinds of online scams that you're investigating?
Well, the primary online scams are exactly that, where either it's a grandparent scam is one we saw a couple of years ago that was quite prevalent, and that's receded into the background a little bit. But what we're seeing are pyramid scams. We're seeing people being phished, being solicited with with either they're being hacked and they have an insertion point by who they view as a friendly, and they're actually not. And they're soliciting banking information and other intelligence, or they're through a phishing mechanism, they're leading people to believe that they're somehow imperiled, or their computer is being ransomed, and now they have to come forward with money to either go to we see this with Bitcoin machines where people are being approached and saying, you have a fine you have to pay. Many of them are coming by way of posing as law enforcement, and it is resulting in a serious loss of funds. And the biggest problem with that, and why we've opened up the online reporting for this, is there is a stigmatization to this. When people often find out that they've been duped, they've been fooled, there's a lot of embarrassment that comes to it, and it doesn't allow us an insertion point by which to help them. And what we hope is that people will come forward very quickly, soon, to another family member, somebody that they trust, and say, does this look realistic? Is this real? And that way then we can be engaged and we can help. And it may be bona fide, but in many cases it's not. So that's what we're hoping that people will see.
Is there any concern about wildfire donation scams right now?
I'm not aware, although I do know that criminal elements will take bona fide opportunities to impact or to find an insertion point with vulnerable communities, with people that are well-meaning, that want to contribute. They can be led. However, there's ways that they can cover off themselves by ensuring that the websites are bona fide, by engaging with the Better Business Bureau and contacting the police, and we can help guide them through that when in doubt.
Hi, Lauren Boothby, Edmonton Journal. Just wanted to pull a thread from something you said about pyramid schemes. Was that like multi-level marketing kind of thing, or what is the pyramid scheme kind of mechanism that you are talking about?
I'm largely speaking to the pyramid schemes that we've seen in the media. I'm not in the fraud department. It's not my wheelhouse. So I'm speaking about the ones where the collection of money where it ultimately results in a collapse and everybody loses their investment, and that could take on many different forms. I won't speak to the intricacies of that, but we do see these coming up, and there are some very high-profile cases of this throughout North America that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I think the better term would be Ponzi scheme. So the funds that are built up and then lost. There was a recent example of the one Edmonton individual out in BC. I think it made the press over the last little while. There were charges. The individual passed away. That file was probably a high-profile one that recently happened with an investment Ponzi scheme. It's the idea of that you're investing one and the other. You're seeing a lot of them in the crypto space, for example. That's the activity that's happening these days.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Ariel from CBC. You mentioned extortion as well and being related somewhat to gaslight. I was wondering to what portion of that increase in crimes is related to gaslight?
Yeah, we could go back and try and answer that more succinctly. I think that investigation is not totally complete, so all the items that are maybe attached to it may not be tagged as that yet. So I think it's a little bit premature for us to say of that 24% increase, 50%. So we can revisit that once that investigation is complete, and we can probably give you a better answer.
And can you say what the increase in Edmonton compares to the national average?
I can't give you a very specific. We could again go back and look at the other jurisdictions to see what that looks like. Like with the fraud, though, it is we know there's other investigations happening in other jurisdictions in Lower Mainland BC and in Peel. So I think it's an issue that's being addressed in a number of places in Canada, and I expect it'll be a similar type of statistic.
Can I ask you, tonight there's a protest about police violence. Can you at all talk about the police plan for this tonight?
Sorry, plan for which?
For the plan for the police protests that will be at stations tonight?
I'm not privy to what the plans are with regards to that at this point.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
You can send us an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Jack Kusi, Global News. Looking at just where these Assault 1 and Assault 2s are happening, I know transit has been a concern for a lot of people. Is that an area that's still a concern for assaults or crimes in general in this?
Yeah, we have been doing a large amount of work and proactive work in transit, particularly around the tracks teams deployments, and we are seeing reductions in transit as well. There are pockets of where, I'll say, the non-domestic violence-based assaults take place. There are geographic pockets to that, transit being one of them in other locations, but it is decreasing over the past 6 months, and we hope to continue that trend.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ariel from CBC, just to follow up on that transit question, are there any areas where you've increased patrol just to address violent crime concerns, or?
Yeah, I think if you look at the high-risk encampment teams and where they're going, as well as the HSOC area downtown, we've moved some of the beat zone adjustments as well to put them in more strategic places as we move forward. Tracks in particular was an item addressed specifically to the transit issues, and that's not solely for violence. It's also for the disorder, et cetera, that's been there. We continue to work with the city on looking at things like SEPTED to improve the areas that have things that would attract individuals who may want to do that. So lighting related things or facility related changes. So we work with our partners to try and address the areas that are hot spots. Where? Probably the best place to go looking would be on the community safety data portal map, where you'll get an idea of where those types of events are taking place. They're all over the city. They're just different sizes and different intensities as you go.
Could you elaborate on why you're focusing on tracks specifically?
Why we're focusing on tracks?
Tracks, yeah.
Tracks is the unit that was stood up in partnership with the provincial government around transit in
I see.
particular. So they are dedicated to addressing transit solely. Thank you.